Another thing I learned is how to do the most work as fast as possible.
Hey, y'all, and welcome. You're listening to the Cowgirl Confessions podcast. I'm your host, Dakota Dawn Johnson, small-town cowgirl with Southern roots, blazing a trail as a Midwest ranch wife, mama, and businesswoman. The mission of Cowgirl Confessions is to share the wonderfully wild and Western life stories of cowgirls from all walks of life. We'll talk about the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to navigating careers, cowboys, kids, and cattle. Legendary cowgirl Dale Evans said it best. Cowgirl is a pioneer spirit, a special brand of American courage. The cowgirl faces life head-on, lives by her own lights, and makes no excuses. Cowgirls take stands. They speak up. They defend the things they hold dear. A cowgirl might be a rancher, a barrel racer, a bull rider, or an actress, but she's just as likely to be a checker at the local Winn-Dixie, a full-time mother, a banker, an attorney, or an astronaut. If you're into wet saddle blankets, talks with God, buckets full of laughter, and the life lessons learned in the process, kick off your boots and settle in. I pray these stories encourage, empower, and give you just the leg up you need. Here's to embracing the cowgirl state of mind, no matter how wild and Western life may get along the way. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cowgirl Confessions podcast. Someone recently asked me what type of job experience I had prior to starting this podcast and adding podcast host and producer to my resume. My immediate thought was, how in the world do I answer this concisely and quickly? I mean, I've had a lot of different work experiences that led up to me starting this podcast, and I also didn't have any intention of being a podcast producer and host on my radar as the end goal when I was working all of those other jobs. I did the best I could to give a quick summary of my education, background, and broadcast journalism, my love for storytelling, and the Western way of life, along with just believing in having a cowgirl state of mind when taking on new ventures. In short, I said I wanted a way to share stories that could be heard for years to come. I didn't think about what it would take to become a podcast producer or host. I focused on what I wanted to do and kept telling myself that I could figure it out as I went, not even having a clue what it was. I don't know if that resonates with you as you listen to me say that, but I truly didn't. I did not know what I was getting myself into whenever I decided that I was going to have a podcast. I just really had this deep belief that I know what I want to do and I'm going to figure out the how on the way to getting to what I want to do. So anyway, this person that asked me laughed and nodded before we, moved on in our conversation. And I've been reflecting on that question ever since. So I want you to pause for a moment, if you will, and take inventory, okay, of all the work experiences you've had. Because that's what I've been doing. I've been journaling about this, and it's what really compelled me to have this podcast today on this topic. Now, as you're taking inventory, if you can write them down right now, that's great. But if you're like me, most of the time you're multitasking as you're listening to the podcast. So go ahead and save. You can save this podcast as one of your favorites, so you could come back to it as a reminder. And you can just listen right now and give yourself the space, if you will, to just kind of take a stroll down memory lane if you can't write it down right now. So like I said, I've had all sorts of jobs through the years, from cleaning stalls, waitressing, being a timer at rodeos. I've been a nanny, a marketing coordinator, cleaning horse trailers. I've been a law office secretary, a freelance journalist, a spokesperson for the sport of rodeo. I've exercised horses, been a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, a restaurant manager, a field service merchandiser, a keynote speaker. I'm now a podcast host, and the list goes on of all these different jobs that I've had over the years. Now, my first job was when I was just 9 years old. I learned how to bus tables, greet customers, and clean at my grandparents' restaurant, the Tin Top Cafe. But my second job, this is the one that, man, when I look back on it, I'm like, this was pivotal in my journey, my life journey. So my second job was it started out as I was cleaning stalls at the Bar V Bar, okay, in Raymer, Alabama. And some things about this that, I mean, I feel like it was yesterday, okay? There's just those moments like you can remember these very intimate details about that experience. And that's how I know that it really made a difference in my life. At the Bar V Bar, this is where I got my very first paycheck, like with my name printed on it. That entire experience opened my eyes to how cool it was to get to work. I was getting paid and trading part of my labor hours for cleaning stalls and halter breaking colts in exchange for lessons, where I learned how to cut. And I got to ride some incredible cutting horses in the process. I didn't come from the cutting horse world. I grew up riding barrel horses and junior rodeo, and so as I was thinking about, hey, when I get in high school rodeo, I'd like to be able to add cutting as one of the events. This helped me in that process. Learning from people that did this, riding horses that knew what they were doing, having someone teach me. So anyway, I've told Mr. George and Miss Donna Von Gall, the owners of the Bar V Bar, many times how much I appreciate them investing in me. But I'm going to say it again on here and just take this as an opportunity. Maybe there's someone that you need to reach out to and say, thanks for giving me that opportunity. Thanks for taking a chance on me, because, at 12 years old, they hired this gal to come clean their stalls, and it turned into so much more than that. So thank you, Mr. George and Miss Donna, for setting an example for me in so many ways. I learned from the start that work can be fun, and getting to go to work is all in what you make of it. The moments I spent there at their barn in Raymer, Alabama, growing up, getting lots of hands-on practice, they were life skills. Like from doing a job right the first time to graduating from being a stall cleaner to getting to exercise their really nice horses and those many moments in between. I didn't know it then, but now looking back, I understand how much that work experience set the standard for how I would approach any job going forward. Even if there were things I didn't love about what I was having to do, I learned that I was going to be determined to do it well, and I was going to look for the silver lining in the process. So fast forward to the summer I graduated college, okay? So this is going to take us to like 2009. I had another job, a really unique job. The money was good and the work wasn't really hard. I was a hybrid nanny for a couple of junior high siblings. And then get this is the really unique part. My other responsibility was helping the kids bottle feed baby deer. Okay. And what I remember the most about this job experience was this feeling that the world was passing me by. You see, in that summer, all of my friends were rodeoing, and I had sold my really good horse back in May of 2009. I actually sold him when I was in Athens, Alabama, competing for Miss Limestone Sheriff's Rodeo. That was a title that I was going to take on to compete in another national pageant. And anyway, all these kind of domino effects, these things lined up to where somebody asked me if my horse was for sale. Wasn't really planning on selling him, but I priced him. They said they wanted him. So then by the time I graduated and, a couple of months later, I didn't have my good horse anymore. I was in this state of mind where it was like, okay, I've graduated college. It's time for me to start preparing for, a big girl job, a big girl life, what that looks like. And so I share that because it was just a brief season of me taking on this job, okay, of being a hybrid nanny and feeding baby deer, doing something that I didn't enjoy in order to set me up for what I was working towards. And that was competing for Miss Rodeo USA in January of 2010. I needed to work and save my money in order to have the resources to go pursue this dream of mine, a dream I'd had since I was a little girl. However, I really wanted to be going up and down the road and rodeoing with all my buddies that summer. And, through that summer, I learned what I didn't want to do. I realized that just because the money was good and the work wasn't hard, that did not equal personal fulfillment in my role. And sacrifices come in different forms. You see, what I felt like was a waste of my summer, working a job I didn't enjoy while everyone else in my circle at the time, it seemed, to be living their best life, burning up the road. It turned out to be a big stepping stone for me. You see, the funds I saved from that set me up to go on to compete for Miss Rodeo USA. And there wasn't any other contestant they interviewed at that pageant with my kind of resume. Um, my work experience made me memorable. And I'd like to think that it left an impression on the judges that I was willing to work hard, regardless of how I felt about the task at hand. Now, some of you may already know this part of my story, but I think it's worth sharing again for those who might not. The year I served as Miss Rodeo USA really catapulted me into the career I have today at Ariat International. The work I did throughout that year for Ariat, who at the time was a Miss Rodeo USA sponsor, put me in contact with the woman who would hire me for my very first contract job with Ariat. And she would go on to become my very first manager when I moved into a full-time position at Ariat. Her name is Christina Shrunk. Christina, thank you for seeing something in me all those years ago and giving me the opportunity to join an amazing company like Ariat. I've been working in a full-time position at Ariat for over 11 years now, and during that time, I've met and had the privilege of learning from some incredible people. Ariat's co-founder and CEO, Beth Cross, being one of them. Beth has been a cheerleader of the work I do and the mission of this podcast since the very beginning, and she was one of my first guests. Here is a snippet of her episode we recorded back in 2021, where she shares about her unique work experiences leading her to where she is today.
Now, leading up to building Ariat, I've had the opportunity to hear you share some of your background, and you just have so much experience, Beth. Could you share with us what some of those work experiences were like?
Well, my work experiences were very varied, let me say. So I started out, I grew up in Pennsylvania on a farm. I have 7 brothers and sisters, and we had horses and sheep and pigs, and that was a great experience. So just working on the farm itself was, I think you start building that work ethic. And also, just understanding that, when you grow up on a farm, you've got all the seasons, you've got when it's really cold, when it's really hot, starts very early. That was a good experience. And then I went to college. I did 2 years of college, and then I stopped. And I decided I wanted to go to work. And I had so many different jobs. I'd been a waitress in high school and in college. One of my jobs coming out of when I was in college working was a dental hygienist. I was a self-trained dental hygienist. I worked on a salmon processing boat in Alaska. I was a cook. I was a breakfast cook at a restaurant. And I've been a cook actually several times. I had a bread route delivering bread in Denver. And that's like a 4:30 a.m. start. And all those jobs, I think, taught me so much. And one of the things I really learned is just how to work with all different kinds of people and how to have fun. Because a lot of those jobs, they're kind of monotonous in many ways. And so really what made all the difference between having fun at work and having less fun, more fun versus less fun, was the people you're working with. So I think I really learned the incredible value of my coworkers and how it could bring such joy, such fun. Really learned, about there were a lot of practical jokes that would go on at work. And it's just, I'm always happy. I'm happy when I'm working. And I think I had a great experience in my 20s just learning that. And of course, being at Ariat after that just reinforced the joy I get from work.
It's so encouraging to see a woman like you that has went on to be extremely successful, both, in your professional life as well as your family life, just to hear how you got to where you're at today and those different experiences. Really, really encouraging. And Beth, one of the things that I feel like so many of us now, as, women in the workforce, a lot of us are mothers, and just, trying to figure out how to do it all in the middle of motherhood. And you started Ariat as a mom. You were already, in that motherhood chapter. So Could you share with us just what that was really like?
Yes. And I think that's some of the most that has made both, of course, the family, my marriage, the family and work has been just created such a rich and kind of exciting experience over the last 30 years. So I mentioned that I had stopped college, dropped out. I did go back and I finished my undergrad degree, and then I went on and to graduate school, and that's where I met my husband. And we got married pretty much the same year, maybe the year before I started the company with my then partner at the time. And my husband, Tony, was working in a different industry. So right after I started the company, we started the company, that's when we had our first child. So our oldest was born the day we started shipping product. And then 2 years later, we had twins. And so we had 3 children under 2. And when our oldest came along, I was able to bring him to work. But then by the time the twins came along, there was no way we could bring 3 really still infants or babies to work. And so it all happened at once. The early days of the company and the early days of our family and just learning how to be a mom. I was still early in our marriage, and then figuring out the work, like all the many work challenges. And I think the one thing I've learned, I did, especially in that time, in the very early days, you get so sleep deprived that I picked up a habit that I've kept to this day, which is taking notes. And I'm kind of a very consistent note taker in meetings. And I did it as a defense mechanism, just so I would remember, what people talked about, what I was learning, et cetera. Another thing I learned is how to do the most work as fast as possible. And think about how I spent my 20s. I mean, as a waitress, as a line cook, even having a bread route. I mean, you get super efficient. And, as a waitress, you're always thinking, I have to walk from here to there. So during that time, I can get water for this table, pick up the check for that table, grab the food for that table and make another pot of coffee, for all the other waitresses. And so even to this day, if I'm walking from here to there, I'm always processing in the back of my mind, what are the 2 or 3 things I can do along the way? So I think you get really good at doing 2 to 3 or even more things at once, frankly. And I think, as the kids got older, out of infancy and started preschool and elementary school, et cetera, those were really demanding times in the business as we were growing the company and hiring people and adding on new customers, et cetera. And I think what I've learned right there is just the importance of focus and the idea that you can do it all. There is not a single day in the last 30 years that I've been able to do everything that needed to be done. I just can't. And so you have to get really good. Of course, I got really good at just prioritizing and saying, there's 2 things in front of me that are absolutely vital right now. One is the family and the other is work. And both of them are big. And so I just found a way to blend them together in a way. And again, this is the ability to do more than one thing at the same time and be able to really be right there with the family, right there with work when the time was, when I was at work, and be able to do both things at once. And I think the thing that really also at home for me was key is when I got home, I was really home. It was just 100% present. And I think kids know that. They can sense it when you're present or whether you're not, and when you're not present. And again, I think it's that commitment is to when you're somewhere, you're absolutely there, present with the person, listening and available. And I think that was so key during those years.
Oh, so much wisdom right there. I'm taking lots of notes while you're talking. And just, I think it's something we all are trying to figure out how to do better each day. And that, like you said, knowing what those top 2 priorities are and then being able to find a way to just blend them together and be present at both. That's wonderful.
Every once in a while when I meet somebody new, they'll say, Dakota, where are you from? And I love having the opportunity to say, I grew up in a small town in rural Alabama. Now, whether you have small town roots or dream of one day trading in the city life for a little slower pace, or maybe you just enjoy an occasional weekend getaway where you can actually see the stars at night, Whatever your version of living the small town life looks like, my friends at thesmalltownlife.com, they have you covered with comfortable and unique ball caps and graphic tees that the entire family will love. Be sure to go follow them on Instagram and Facebook and use the hashtag #TheSmallTownLife when you're out there doing the small town living.
Okay, Ariat has grown immensely since those early days. You truly have, a team that is spread across the globe now. So what are some qualities that you admire in others, Beth, and you look for in people when you're hiring those team members?
That is probably the most important thing that we do is, when we're adding to the team and adding to the family. And so, of course, you look for people that are good at their job, or else show, really high potential. And you have to assume the skills are there, but we hire people right out of college that may not have the skills yet. And so then I think we always are just looking for mindset. Do they have a learning mindset? Are they curious? Do they ask questions? And that's the thing I love the most. And I have to say, for me personally, when I think about the people I most enjoy working with now, looking back, it's people who have a endless ability to laugh at themselves and just have fun. And I think this is a consequence of my 20s spent doing all the jobs that I did, where you really learn, having fun with the people you work with and be able to laugh at yourself and at others makes all the difference. And, we've gone through some really, really hard times with people. And many of us have been together 20, 25, more than 25 years. And our kids have grown up, our families have grown up. We've been through losing parents and sickness. And it really is kind of in sickness and in health in many ways. And I think to find people to work with who not only have the skills and the work ethic, but have a sense of humor, a real sense of their own humanity, integrity, and honesty, and you can build a life for people. That in many ways I have, and we have at work. And so in some ways, I think it's people that you'd be comfortable in that way building a life with, because you're essentially building a company, building a business, building a culture together. And you depend on each other for the values that you bring.
Wow. I still get butterflies when I think about the power that Beth's words carry and how encouraging her message will be to women from all walks of life for years to come. I remember feeling seen and heard when she shared her note-taking practice that day we recorded. You see, I was 7 months pregnant with our second son, McCrae, when I recorded Beth's episode in the backseat of my truck from the doctor's office parking lot. I had a checkup that day, and it had taken a little bit longer than anticipated. So I had just recently taken on a new role during that time frame at Ariat. I was a new footwear rep, and it felt like I was drinking from a fire hose, learning all the ins and outs of the footwear product and business after 7 years of being on the apparel side at Ariat. And you combine that with lots of travel, having a wonderfully wild and Western 2-year-old, our family's feeder calf operation, this podcast being in its infancy stage, and just life in general. I was in a season of not being able to remember anything unless I wrote it down. I mean, that was my reality. I was like, I walked into the grocery store. I don't remember what I need to get. Oh, I've walked to my laundry room to get something I thought about I needed in the kitchen, and I don't remember what it is. Like, that was where I was at. And I'd like to say that has changed. It's improved. Okay. But the reality is that note-taking is what allows me to do all the things I love. And I find a lot of joy and great fulfillment in doing well. So when I heard Beth say that she does that, she is an avid note taker, it made me shift my thinking from feeling like I had to note take in order to remember, anything. I felt like I wasn't measuring up, like maybe something was wrong with me. Maybe I was just behind, like what is going on here? And then it shifted my way of thinking to, hey, this woman who is extremely successful that I admire, she's a CEO of a worldwide, footwear and apparel brand, and she takes notes. This is part of her daily practice and part of what makes her so great at her job, to where she can remember things. It helped me shift my thought process to going, okay, So taking notes is actually a really great skill that I have and something that I should lean into and not have guilt about having to do it in order to keep up with what all I have going on. Friend, there's power in sharing our stories as well as our processes. And a lot of that comes from, the power is that when we share those things, it can help others not feel alone and hopefully change their outlook too, giving them just the leg up they need. If you enjoyed this episode, would you mind leaving us a review and sharing it with a friend? It would mean the world to me. Thank you for joining us and have a blessed day, my friend.
Thank you for spending your time with me on the Cowgirl Confessions podcast. I'm so glad y'all stopped by. If you could take a moment to share this episode and tag us on social media, I'd be happier than a cowgirl in a sea of buy one, get one vintage turquoise. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. New episodes will be released bi-monthly. Please leave us a review if you feel so led by going to iTunes. Your feedback will really help us breed the idea of grabbing life by the horns with a cowgirl state of mind into women across the globe. Some that may have never even had the privilege to throw their leg over a horse, but could most certainly use the cowgirl state of mind while navigating life. Thanks again, y'all. Until next time, keep pursuing your dreams with that all go and no woe mentality. Remember, you're writing a story that's worth saddling up for, sister.